to actually report on Bitcoin.
Yes. Because it's thanks to guys like you, who we found to be newsworthy. And then when we talked to you, we found that there's tremendous intellectual depth to what's happening there with Bitcoin. And so one of my questions I wanted to ask you is that in the beginning, back in the 2009, 10, 11 period, it was very difficult to describe what Bitcoin is. And here we are in 2018. And I think it's safe to say that it's still very difficult to describe what Bitcoin is. When I hear people on CNBC and other mainstream outlets talk about Bitcoin, they don't really seem to understand it any better than people were trying to understand it back in 2011. What do you think of that statement?
Bitcoin is not some investment scheme. It's not a more convenient way to trade money online. Bitcoin, as it said on the original website, is a peer-to-peer form of money that cannot be controlled by governments and central banks. It's really important we don't lose sight of that, so that what Bitcoin can truly achieve for humanity, which is liberation from this financial system of enslavement, actually becomes realized.
What do you think about this Lambo crowd? I mean, I go to North American Bitcoin Conference for a couple of years now, and it's grown to thousands of participants. You know, the early meetups were maybe 5 or 6. You ran the first Bitcoin conference ever in Prague. There were a couple, developers there, maybe 20 or 30 people or 100 people, I guess, in total. But now you've got this idea that it's Lambos for everybody. And it seems like that's far removed from the original vision. You talked about the Satoshi white paper there. But, and you also mentioned it's a get-rich-quick scheme. Some have said it's a get-rich-quick scheme disguised, really, to get people to accept money that isn't controlled by third parties, that isn't controlled by governments. It's kind of like seduce people into accepting something that's highly subversive.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. It's great that we have so much capital in this community and in all of the cryptocurrency communities that people are really putting into a lot of projects to think about how can we not just construct financial systems, but new form of law, governance, economy, all of the social life. And that's fantastic because as technologists, we're putting our energies into these things for literally the last 200 years. And for the first time in that period, we have access to huge amounts of capital to realize our visions. At the same time, we have to realize that it's not just capital that will automatically create value. There actually is a core of people, and that core of people is driven for a vision, for an idea of the world. And
okay, that's an interesting idea, that capital is not necessarily going to create the value.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a very interesting statement. So the value resides somewhere else. It's in the network. It's in this rabbit hole we call Bitcoin that people can get lost in very quickly. And the value proposition is not obvious. And so then we come to the idea of why do these mainstream economists like Nouriel Roubini or Paul Krugman at the New York Times, why do they get it so wrong? What are they missing? They tend to just totally misunderstand what's happening here. What do you think?
What we're experiencing now in the West, also with the rise of the right-wing nationalist groups and religious fundamentalists, is a clash of two fundamental worldviews. There is like an older viewpoint of the world, which just sees the world in terms of like what we can see, what we can touch, and it is something that fundamentally see that all of the questions, all of the like problems of humanity can be reduced to economic questions. But what we're experiencing in the West is something deeper, is like a loss of our humanity, is a lack of meaning and purpose. That people work their entire lives, jobs that they know is completely meaningless, that has no value whatsoever for money which is literally printed by a central bank. And there is now a growing desire that people want to they want to have lives, they don't just want to be objects or mechanical parts in a giant apparatus that is managed by an elite that's just trying to keep the capital flowing, to keep the system stable. That people are seeing more and more that there's like a lack of aspiration or ambition, and it's deadening. And what Bitcoin represents is a way for us to break free of this system of financial or economic inscription of a vast labor force of people.
It seems that economics has evolved over the past 100 years since, or so, since the Industrial Revolution, which brought in an era of specialization, and specialization to the degree where you have people in slave factories in China, assembling products like iPhones, and it's mind-numbingly repetitious. And so you also have the rise of technologies like search engines, which afford people the ability to completely forget what's in their heads. They don't need a brain, essentially, because it's being outsourced to a third party, this platform called a search engine. But it seems like Bitcoin is reversing that trend. It's bringing back a consciousness fusion in that all of our thoughts are being time-stamped every 10 minutes to validate this value proposition. And I wanted to ask if you think that the current technology, which is processing 40 quintillion transactions a second, that's 40,000 quadrillion transactions a second, is leading us to something that maybe we haven't even imagined yet. Some kind of consciousness fusion on the horizon. I don't mean to get too esoteric here, but we've had many conversations about this technology, and I haven't talked to you in a while. Have you had any new thoughts along these lines?
I think technology, it doesn't go in a straight line. It can go in many different directions.